Okay friends, it's time to get started on replacing our coolant overflow tank. Now this is going to be located right here on the passenger side front of the vehicle. To do this, I always like to make sure that the radiator is cool to the touch. I don't like the thought of having hot coolant flowing around while I'm trying to do any of this. Also, hand and eye protection at all times. With that said, let's come right up here to the top of the radiator and you're going to find the overflow hose. For that, you can either use a socket or a flathead screwdriver. And I'm just going to go ahead and loosen this up just enough so I can slide the hose off of the radiator. Now you just want to inspect that hose. Obviously we're going to be replacing it anyway, but it's a good idea to have a look anyway. The next thing that we're going to do is start taking off this plastic panel that goes all the way across the front of the vehicle. For it, you're going to find 6 push tabs that you're going to have to press in and out to be able to remove and reinstall this. Now I'm just going to use a trim tool here. Carefully get in between this area, and then we'll just carefully pop it up. There we are. Now we can make our way all the way across, removing all of them as we go. Let's remove this piece and set it aside. Now the next thing that we're going to do is start removing the grill from this area so we can have access to being able to remove this reservoir. You're going to find 4 10mm headed screws right up along the top. Go ahead and remove them. Let's go ahead and grab onto this. We're going to give it a little wiggle, try to separate it from the bottom. And now we can remove our grill. Now that we have that out of the way, we have a nice clear view of our coolant reservoir. Now we're not going to be able to go ahead and pull this out yet. It looks like it's out in the open, but it does actually curl in and behind this area right there. So with that said, we're going to have to remove this area as well. Now for this, you're going to find several bolts. If you were to carefully lift this up, you're going to find a 10mm bolt located right underneath this area. And then continuing on over towards the driver's side, you're going to be able to find another one right down there. Let's remove the pair of those and then we'll continue up top. Follow it over here. Now we're going to continue up along the top here. You're going to find 2 13mm headed bolts, one on the passenger side and one on the driver's side in the same position. Let's carefully grab onto this and remove it from the vehicle. Pull this right out of here along the top. Right up along the top here, you're going to find this. Just go ahead and pull that off. You don't have to disconnect that wire. We'll just set it right up along the top. All right, so we're at the point that we can start removing our coolant overflow tank. You're going to have 2 10mm headed bolts that hold this in. One located up along the top here. And then if you were to follow it down, you're going to find the second. Before we start removing those, I want to mention the coolant overflow hose that runs along here. And of course, that's the area that went up to that radiator. So just keep that in mind as we start pulling this away. Let's start down along the bottom. We'll remove that 10. Make our way up to the top. Carefully grab that reservoir, lift it up, and start removing it from the vehicle. All right, so now that we have that out of there, there's going to be a couple things that you want to think about. On the end of that hose, where connected onto the radiator, you have that clamp. For me personally, if I look at it, I can tell that it's reusable, so I'm going to go ahead and reuse it. With that said, I'm going to set it aside. Other than that, inside this tank, you're going to have some coolant, probably about halfway up. It's up to you to decide whether or not you're going to reuse it, put it back into the brand new reservoir, or if you're going to recycle it and dispose of it properly. And the last thing to think about is if you were to open this up, inside this, you're going to find a little dipstick for checking the fluid level. This you just want to go ahead and clean off and transfer over to the brand new unit. All right, now it's time to install our brand new coolant reservoir. Now what I want to do is just take this hose, I'm going to line it up with this area here and just press it in. Once you have that pressed in, we're also going to put it down and through this slot here. Now we can go ahead and take that hose and we're going to run it up inside this area so it can meet up with the radiator once we get it in. Let's go ahead and put this into position. Now we're going to want to pay attention to this area here. You're going to have two tabs that need to line up with their corresponding holes, and then we'll slide it down and in. Press that in there. Double check just to make sure it's lined up. Press it down in there. Now we're going to pay attention to our two bolt holes up along the top and the bottom. Make sure they're lined up. Grab those bolts, start them both in, and then snug them up. Once you have them both started, snug them up. Now we can go ahead and get this center unit in here. Before we do though, I just wanted to talk to you about this area. Now this little flap that's down along the bottom needs to slide in and underneath this area. The reason why this is even on here is to help direct the air directly in and through the radiator. If you have this in the wrong position, you could restrict airflow. Now when I put this in, I'm just going to go ahead and put that down and into position along the side here. We'll bring this one along there. And now we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side of the vehicle. Okay, now let's get everything lined up and start in our bolts. Let's start with our upper 13mm bolts. Now we're not going to tighten any of these up. We're going to continue on down along the bottom with our 10mm headed bolts. For this, you want to make sure you get the proper angle, otherwise you're going to cross-thread it in. Generally, you just have to push down on the plastic aspect of the bumper. You should be able to get it lined up fairly decently. All right. So now that they're all started, we can snug them up. Now we can snug up our 13mm headed bolts up along the top. Move our way down to the bottom. Tighten up both of those 10mm headed bolts. All right, go ahead and fold this down. Okay, so now it's going to be time to get ready to install the grill. Looking at the bottom of the grill, you're going to see that you have several push tabs that are going to slide right into position inside the body of the vehicle. Aside from that, there's also going to be some clips on either side that need to fit in as well. So when you're looking at this, you want to make sure that they line up with their corresponding holes as you start inserting the grill. Let's carefully bring this in, being very careful not to scratch our bumper in any way. paying attention down along the bottom. I'm making sure that it's trying to line up with its corresponding slots. Once it is, just go ahead and carefully press it in. Perfect. Now we're going to go ahead and start inserting our mounting bolts. Looking at the 4 bolts that we removed, you can see 2 of them look different than the other 2. Now the 2 that have the coarse threads go on either corner, so basically the farthest out. The 2 that have the fine threads are the center bolts. Now we can start inserting these. We'll go coarse thread right out here, like I mentioned. Fine thread in the center. Another fine thread. Finish it off with this coarse thread. Snug them up. Don't forget about that hood release cable. Now we can go ahead and get this plastic piece up on here. We're going to try to line everything up. I'll make my way along a corner first. We're going to press in that push tab. Now we can come up along the front. Now we'll make our way to our inner tabs. These ones sometimes can be a little bit harder to push in, like this one. There we are. Perfect. Now we can attach our overflow hose to the radiator. Press that in as far as you can. Resecure your clamp. Make sure that's nice and tight. That feels good. Now feeling down along the backside here, you can feel a groove inside the coolant reservoir. That's for this set of wiring right here. So just go ahead and secure it into the back right there by gently pressing it in. Now it's going to be time to talk about the coolant reservoir dipstick. Looking down at the far end, which would go deepest into the reservoir, you're going to see a dot that says minimum right next to it. Let's follow that about halfway up. You're going to find another dot that says maximum. As you can tell, that doesn't necessarily go all the way up to the top of the tank. It's only approximately halfway. So keep that in mind as you continue filling this reservoir. To do that, I'm just going to go ahead and open this up. We can start adding coolant, and we'll just keep checking it with that dipstick as we go. When you're filling this, it's a good idea to use the manufacturer specified fluid. Give that dipstick a little wipe, make sure it's dry. Slide it right in there. Now we can lift it right on back up and give it a look. As you can tell, at this point I have it approximately right here. It even looks like it may be up towards the maximum line. At this point, I don't want to continue filling it, so it comes all the way up here, because of course at that point it would be considered over full. So let's just go ahead and take this. We'll slide it back down into position, close this up. Close the hood, and down the road you go.